Okay, can you hear me? Yes. Where's the clicker?
There you go.
Oh, perfect. Okay, I am Ben, founder, CEO of Midwest Games. I am also the president of the Wisconsin Games Alliance and executive chair of MDev, which is the largest games industry-focused event in the Midwest. Basically, think of it like GDC of the Midwest. We just had that last week, so I'm relieved I don't have to be running an event. I can just come speak, which is awesome. Okay, as soon as we get the slides up.
We updated the password for the stream, and we have to get it changed on our end. My bad.
So is anyone here from the Midwest? Yeah, somebody cheer, like, come on, like a little bit. Sorry, it's a little cheesy, but I'm from Wisconsin. Yeah, there we go. You got my humor right away, off the bat. I'm improvising here, so let's do it. So I'm originally from Wisconsin, went to college in Wisconsin at UW Green Bay. Love, being from the Midwest. And ultimately, I've always had a chip on my shoulder of like, why is games not done? Ooh, I think we gotta switch it.
It should be.
I think you gotta swap it.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. So I always had a chip on my shoulder of why are games not made in bigger ways in the middle of our country, really everywhere but California, Washington, and now Texas a bit as well. And so I'm here to talk to you about making games in new places because post-COVID, we have a new opportunity ahead of us. The entire game has changed, and we can do more elsewhere because of the emergence of remote work, which was in existence before COVID, but game development especially has been shown you can do it anywhere. And people are doing it everywhere, but people aren't necessarily getting supported everywhere. Okay, so a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm from Wisconsin, UW Green Bay graduate. I've worked on publishing over 100 games at this point, which is wild to think about. Like I had to sit down and actually like count one by one, and it was insane in a way. And you're able to do that in the publishing end of things because the publisher is all about managing a number of projects all at once and really kind of being that resource that's necessary at key points during the development process. So I've led also campaigns for over 50 films, and my journey, from Wisconsin through the games industry really started at 2K. So I joined 2K in the very early days of 2K when we were a pretty small publisher at the time, just putting out the beginnings of Borderlands and BioShock, relaunching XCOM. NBA 2K grew into this behemoth that it is today. And I was very fortunate because I was in a role of operations. There was the only operations person in the company that wasn't an executive. So I got exposure to every piece of the company, from development to all of the publishing operations to the executive teams. And what I did at first was I became really good at creating presentations. I was a presentation master of the company, and that got me into rooms that I would have never gotten into except because of that skill. And so then I was sitting in board of directors presentations at Take-Two. I was in global sales presentations all around the world to help support what was happening. And that just allowed me to kind of accelerate my career. So a big thing is as you go out into your career, look for unique opportunities. Look for things that you can become really, really good at that executives will want to pull you into a room to be the person that manages something, because that's really where my career jumped off of. I built out the central technology group at 2K. I reorged the global marketing organization, living in London, Paris, Madrid, Munich, Amsterdam, and Singapore. And then I took all those skills and went to Blizzard. Blizzard was building out the cross-functional esports org at the time. They brought me in as a product manager to basically manage that around BlizzCon. So I did that for a while. And then Netflix came calling, and they were building out a films division. And so I was the first hire in the marketing operations team for film, led 55 films in 3 years. and built out all the infrastructure for how we manage campaigns there. It gave me a unique perspective, like working in games and then seeing how the films industry operates and how different that is. And they're at a different time span in their life compared to what we are in games, where games is fairly young in the scheme of things. So films is over 100 years old at this point. And then sure enough, Netflix was like, we want to do games too. And so I joined the game side at Netflix and built led the launch of the product and built out all the launch operations at the company, working with Apple and Google to figure out how we can put out a mass amount of titles in a short period of time. And then ultimately, it led me to where I am today of deciding where do I want to create impact and what matters to me. And so I decided to go back to where I came from. I saw an opportunity, I saw a gap, I saw a bunch of folks that were underserved in the areas that I have expertise in, which happens to be the marketing, publishing, support layers that a publisher provides, and the funding layers so that you can get the money, get the support needed to get products to market. With that, we announced with IGN in August of 2023, Midwest Games, and our big goal is supporting underserved developers in underserved places. The Midwest is one of those places. There's places all around the world. And so we've signed studios in Mexico, in Turkey, in many other places around the world that ultimately are under-supported. We're based in Green Bay, Wisconsin, right across from Lambeau Field, which is really awesome as a Packers fan. I don't know if there's any other Packers fans here, but yeah. That's the, cheese heads, get it. There you go. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the current state of the industry. Some of you are very familiar with this, but yeah, I don't know what's going on with that, but that's meant to be a microphone. So platforms are flooded in a major way. We're talking about potentially 17,000 games coming out this year. I expect that to grow to 20,000, 25,000 on PC alone. And so there's a mass congestion in the market. It's creating challenges for how do you break through? How do you cut through the noise and get your game to be noticed by audiences? And it's a huge challenge. And that's, it's a key piece to understand as young developers. Well, how do we create something that will attract an audience? You have to think about that all the way throughout the process. And some people get lucky and they just create something and it finds an audience. But if you're thoughtful about it, if you're purposeful about it, it can make a huge difference when you're going to compete with a lot of other people in the market. So quality isn't enough anymore. I see games all the time that are awesome games in their own right, but they don't necessarily hit an audience. And success right now is just less predictable than it used to be. I don't know what's with the graphics, but we'll not worry about that too much. So discoverability is an issue. The size of the industry is not very big. About 270,000 in the U.S. For comparison, Google alone as a company is 182,000. So it's not a very big industry in the scheme of things. And then 3 states make up 62% of the industry: California, Washington, and Texas. And so that is an enormous amount of the industry in very few places. You could add New York and Florida and get another 10% to 72% in 5 states. So we have a challenge of the existing industry being in just very few places. And there's a lack of stability right now, which I'm sure is concerning for a lot of people. 30,000 plus layoffs the last 3 years. It's an enormous amount. Now, there's a lot of factors that go into that. Normalization posted a massive amount of investment that happened in the games industry during COVID. But that will eventually correct itself, and the industry is growing. So these are some of the current hubs in the industry. And so you can see it's not very many places. But that's changing right now. We're seeing some more things come from more places. And I expect a lot of these places to be kind of the future hubs. And New Zealand wasn't on the map, but it's it's there as well. So a big piece of the future is, okay, as these places start to emerge, how do we better support them? And I'm going to talk through like some of the ways I see supporting these places. Again, I don't know if I converted this from a Canva to a PowerPoint and it screwed up some formatting. So some things that are changing right now. So as comic books content and IP starts to wane in films and others, it's having more of a struggle. Video games is taking off in a huge way, and it's taking off in a way of indie games as well, where if you look at Netflix, which all too familiar with, you look at a show like Cuphead, and Cuphead was a top 10 streamed show on Netflix globally. Cuphead, which is a small indie game in the scheme of things. And so there's a lot of opportunities happening in the space around IP. So know the value of the IP that you're creating. If something takes off, that becomes incredibly valuable and can go to many places. We have a new era coming. We think about the eras of games, like we think about the arcade era, and then moving to console. You know, still very physical, but at home. Then we move to a digital era where it's very much, you know, you can get everything you need digitally, and we're moving to a completely digital era. We're not there yet. We're probably 5 to 10 years away, but we're in this transition phase where you're going to be able to play anything on any device at any time with anyone. And so this cloud era and other direct-to-consumer opportunities of content is coming and emerging in a big way, and will eventually take over as technology catches up to what we want to do. And we're in an indie golden age. This year has been a huge year for indies. I think it's grown 6% from an overall pie perspective, which is a huge amount in a scheme of things. Now, is that just a trend? You know, last year was the biggest year of hits ever. So is it just because last year was a big hit and this one, you know, indies had more space to grow? We'll see. Like it's kind of unknown. We know GTA is coming down the line as well, and that's everyone wants to avoid that. If you're not GTA, and so like, what is next year going to look like? But this year has been a huge year for indies, and I think it's actually a trend in the direction of we're seeing smaller studios create bigger games because of the tooling, the engines, everything that they have at their disposal. And so there's a lot of opportunity that comes with that. So, building an ecosystem. A lot of you, like I do a lot of talks, and a lot of the talks are with people that don't understand games in any way, shape, or form, government officials, investors, others, because part of my mission is, well, we have to get more support. And in order to do that, we need more money, we need more mechanisms for support. So, you know, a lot of this might not be a surprise to you, or maybe it is. But you know, games is 7 times bigger than the films industry. It's bigger than films, TV, music combined ×2. It's a massive industry, a $340 billion industry that's supposed to grow to $580 billion by 2028. Gen Z, #1 activity is games. Now that was like, okay, yeah, duh. That's never happened with a generation before. Video games is the #1 now, and that's huge. And then when you look at the other end of the spectrum, baby boomers is the fastest growing generation. And a lot of that has to do with, you know, folks like the AARP and others have put out studies that show you live longer by playing video games because you're using your brain, the cognitive function, and you're socializing. Because games, as much as for a long time the stereotype was, oh, you're just gaming all by yourself. No, it's one of the greatest social functions you can possibly do. And so older folks are being encouraged to game more often to literally extend their lives. Okay, so this is Midwest. You know, I know that we're not in the Midwest right now, but there's a lot of the similar kinds of factors in play here. And this isn't apples to oranges because I couldn't actually get the full comp data in the Midwest, but imagine this times like an additional 30% or so, and you get a good idea of it's, it's very expensive operating where the industry is operating today. And with layoffs, with the requirement to become more efficient, they're going to look at new places to do things. And places like the Midwest, places like the Northeast, places outside of the US that are lower cost are going to become very attractive, especially as talent is proving themselves in those places that they can do the same things or more than the existing talent can do. And it's a huge difference to be able to pay less than half the cost for the same employee somewhere else. And that will cause a shift in the industry. A big piece of this is we have to advocate for others. We have to highlight what we have. Now this, again, like I've centered around my place. All of this is made in Madison, Wisconsin. Shocking, right? You don't realize that all these games are worked on in Madison. And the funny thing is, I think you could say very similar about the Tri-Cities here, where there's a number of huge games that people don't realize are made right here. And what's funny for me is I will talk to people that are in the industry in Wisconsin, and they don't even know that this is. So a big piece of what I will advocate for all of you to do is highlight the wins in your backyard, highlight the big companies around you, highlight all these things, because that helps generate awareness for the greater industry to know that big things actually are happening here, and you need to know about it. This one really got messed up. Okay, here we go. So the steps ahead, or blocks, or whatever the heck these are. I'm a big advocate of community engagement. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you know that. And you have to be able to bring people together around events just like this. This makes a huge difference. This will allow you to connect with new people, potentially people you might work with and create a studio with, or might, 10 years down the line, get you a job somewhere else because you met them at this event. It's amazing what the network effect can do. It can unlock so many doors that otherwise you wouldn't have access into. And so take advantage of that, but encourage and build a community because how we survive and how we thrive in places that aren't supported is by supporting one another and building up these things together. Wolfjam was at MDev last week, and now I'm here. Like, we're helping each other grow each other's ecosystems. Did not mean to go forward. I'm going to go into investor growth and then government incentives. And then what really matters is creating this big moment that changes everything. Okay, so welcome to Wolfjam. Yeah, come on. This is one of many events that are now starting to pop up. Like this, is the second year for us. MDev has been around for 6 years now. GDEX in Columbus, Ohio, and there's many others that are happening in the ecosystem. And if we start to go and support each of those things, that's going to help them grow. That is also going to attract others to come to those events because they're going to see that they're growing. And that's where you start to create a larger community of people. Most exciting chart of the day. Investor growth. It's really important. And this is one thing I didn't realize early in my career, didn't think about, didn't consider, but it's so incredibly important. The reason why California is 50% of the industry is because they have all the investors. They have all the money, and it's the same cycle. The same people getting the same money over and over and over again. So if we want to change that cycle, we have to get investors here to better understand the games industry, be comfortable with it, and start investing in it. Because in Wisconsin, you know what they invest in? Agriculture, manufacturing, healthcare, insurance, and those industries do really well there because they get funding. If we want to get the industry bigger, we have to talk to investors. We have to educate them, and it's really painful because They don't understand it for the most part, games at all. They're like, my grandkid plays a game and like, they don't get it. It's not, a lot of the wealth is in a generation that didn't game. That was not their number one activity. That wasn't remotely close. It wasn't something that was even an option. And so we have to create education moments so that we can change this. And you have to know the market. You have to pay attention to things like this. Know who Convoy is, who puts out some of these data. They're a venture capital firm. And know, what is happening in the market, because the market affects our ability to get investment into developers, and those developers then hire. And where those developers are hiring affects the ability to build a community in those places. Tax incentives, they matter. Like grants, all of those kinds of things matter, and you actually have more influence than you realize. By talking to your government officials, you can make a difference. We're working actually on a 30% tax incentive for video games, not a film tax credit, not attached to larger entertainment. It would be the first one in the United States that's specific to video games. And that's because we've been advocating for it. We've been working with them for a number of years to try and get it. And now we finally have both sides of the aisle on board with it. We're hoping to get it now we're past this wild election cycle. We now have a chance to move that forward. And if we're able to do that, suddenly other states are going to go, well, we're going to compete with that now. And then you can start to get a better environment that, if I'm spending 30% less, I can do more. I have a higher chance of success because I'm able to take that money and put it towards something else that hopefully helps my business. And then we need to get to a watershed moment. And what that means is if you look at a place like the Nordic region, and ultimately, it was not an overnight thing. They built a lot of games for a long time before suddenly Minecraft takes off in Stockholm or Supercell takes off. It takes a long time for that to happen. So what we need to do is we need more games. We need more failures because that leads to success. You don't make your first game and then suddenly it's going to be a big success. Most of the games I've worked on have not succeeded in market. Statistically, that's accurate. You have to take both things, both sides of the coin. And some of my favorite projects I ever worked on were huge failures. They were challenges. We learned from them. We grew from them. We improved, and we made the next thing better. We have to do a lot of that in regions outside of the existing hubs, for those regions to have their watershed moment that allows them to grow into something much larger. So what I look at is, what are the ingredients? And we have all the ingredients in places like this, places like the Midwest. We have all the talent. Events like this showcase, look, you're all here. A lot of you probably don't know each other, meeting for the first time. And that allows us to create the potential of something taking off. Because one of your studios someday could be the studio that makes this the place for a lot of other game developers to come. And so you have that potential, but it's going to take a lot of failures in the market before we finally get there. And just constantly learn from the moments, because this is an iterative business. You have to keep learning, keep growing, keep pushing forward even when times are tough, because that's what leads to the larger success. And that's my talk. Do we have any time for Q&A or no?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So if anybody has any questions, we're going to open up the floor to Q&A. If you're interested in asking any questions, please raise your hand and I'll be coming over and getting your name and your question. For those of you at home in the Discord, please go ahead and put your questions in chat as well as with your name, and we'll go ahead and ask them online here as well. Okay. And what is your question?
I just want to know about best ways to get in contact with your state representatives.
Ooh. Aaron would like to know, what is the best way to get in contact with your state representatives?
You could try emailing them, but they're unlikely to respond. Find their network, find the events that are happening. So there's networking events that they are always going to because obviously they have to be out in the community. They have to. They're always raising money. So raise any place that has money, find investors or that are donors, and you will find politicians. But find their network. A lot of them are on LinkedIn. And so you can try to reach out to them. That's a more direct way, and get a hold of their assistants or admins, and try to get through. A lot of the smaller ones or younger ones, you have a better chance of getting through. And what we've been able to do is we have a lot of the new representatives are younger and they game. So finding those ones is a great way because they're way more open to talking about, especially about the industry, and opportunities to grow it wherever you are.
I'm gonna let you ask the question.
So you said you worked on a lot of projects. What would you say your favorite project?
Okay. So for those that couldn't hear that, what is my favorite project? Having worked on many. Probably Borderlands 2. It just became such a huge success from a games end of things. And then films end, probably Bird Box, just because that film has now been seen by over 1 billion people. And we didn't realize in the moment what that thing was going to become, but it taught me so many lessons of how you try new things. Like we took a lot of risks with Bird Box. We called it the 3 Bs of Bird Box. One was birds. Second was Bullock, because Sandra Bullock always is a rock star. And then the third was blindfolds. And we did a really risky thing. And on the key art, which is iconic key art at this point, we covered an A-list celebrity. Half of her face was covered with a blindfold. And that was a big no-no in Hollywood at the time. But that is what drew attention because you're like, wait a second. What's going on here? Like that is, and then people were driving around with blindfolds on, and we had to, back off legally from that a little bit. So that's probably the projects that taught me the most, or was most exciting, seeing people's reactions.
It's a difficult question to answer for the board, but what's like a common stigma, but misconception about the games industry that you can disprove or just say that's not how this actually happens?
Yeah, I mean, it's not people making games in basements. The industry is 50-50 female, male, because oftentimes it's like, oh, it's just a bunch of dudes. No, everyone games. Everyone can be a game developer. So those are some of the stigmas that are completely false. Can't think of any other. There's many others, but I can't think off the top of my head.
Hi, Connor Wolfjam, career coach at Champlain College. With the video game industry being as volatile as it is right now, a lot of my students are starting to look into taking their skills into other industries.
Mhm.
Since you have the experience of having worked in both the video game industry and the film industry, what are some surprising applications you've seen of some niche video game skills that have translated beautifully into the film sphere?
Yeah. So I even started my career in radio. So I've worked in many different areas of entertainment. And if you really take a step back and you go, okay, what are we really doing here? We are entertaining consumers. We're giving them something that they want to be excited about, that they want to go spend their hard-earned time to go and do. And so ultimately always bring it back to the consumer of like, it's not about you forcing them to do something. It's about them wanting to go do it. And the best games, the best entertainment, and the best, companies always understand that it comes down to the consumer and delivering something that's worthwhile. And so if you're not thinking about the consumer when you're making a game, like who is that person that's going to be playing this thing and why are they going to enjoy it? Then you're ultimately missing the whole point.
Awesome. We have a question from Sidekick in the Discord. They want to know, how do you deal with burnout if you ever face it? Game industry sounds really fun, but also very stressful.
Yeah, game industry is not known for always being the healthiest place to work, and it can be toxic. So I think a big key is finding companies that are clear about their mission, their culture, their purpose. Calling out, giving feedback on things when you see something's wrong, making sure you say something. Uh, and so the reality is like there's moments where you have to work really hard to make something happen, especially anyone in events or things like that. Like there's just a lot of work the last mile to make something happen. But ultimately, if that's your everyday, all day, that's not a healthy environment. And ultimately, something has to change. If you have to do that just to survive, maybe there's something wrong with the whole system you're in. And so starting to look at the system around you and saying, okay, well, what is causing this that we could fix upstream to make it better? And so, yeah, there's a lot of studios with bad practices. And so I think you have to be careful with who you're going to work for and understand what their priorities are and how they treat their people.
I was just wondering, when it comes to on the publisher side, you were mentioning how we need to make more games and to have failures. As a publisher, how do you assess what's worth taking that risk to fund? And also, how do you manage when a game is a commercial failure? Like, how do you keep yourself afloat as a publishing company?
Most things fail. Like, I think why publishers make most of the money in the industry is they understand that most things fail, and they get really good at understanding the risk that you're taking and how to balance it across a portfolio of titles to be able to manage that risk along with the high upside. So for me, like in indie space, I need 1 out of 10 to succeed in large way. Now that doesn't mean that the other 9 aren't high quality games, really good. They just might not hit that moment. And some of this is luck in market. Like you can do every single thing right that you can think about and still fail. You could do nothing right and succeed. And so you just have to know that. And so publishers evaluate the risk across so many things and try to look at the data and try to make informed decisions, which at times makes it frustrating for developers working with publishers because they're so looking at the numbers, looking at the risk, looking at these things. But that's how they also end up making the vast majority of the revenue in the industry. And so for me, I realized that I suck at picking games. Every publisher sucks at picking games. And that's the reality. And what they know is statistically what the breakthrough rates are per genre and things like that. And so if you make enough bets, statistically, there will be a breakout if you consistently pick good games over time.
Hi, I'm Mike Halsey from Spotlight Newspapers, and I'm going to ask the Homer question.
Yeah.
From your perspective, you're from the Midwest. From your perspective, what kind of reputation does this area have with developing games, and what kind of pride can we take in our successes?
Mm-hmm. So the reputation, when I think about it, and I have a bias being from these areas, when I think about it, I think about folks that even if they're white collar, they have a little bit of a blue collar mentality to working and how they work and the dedication and willing to go the extra mile. And you don't always see that, especially if you're constantly getting funding and have money and have the good stuff. You don't have to be efficient. And so sometimes the fact that we don't have things allows us to become much better at doing it. And so the reputation is really positive. That's why they try to get people from these areas to go move out to the West Coast because they're some of the best workers. And the thing I learned about working in California is half the people I worked with were all from these places, from the Midwest, from Wisconsin. The amount of people, and the Wisconsin person always tells you they're from Wisconsin. So if they're not wearing a cheese head, and so. And then what was your second question?
What kind of pride can we take in our success?
Yes. So huge things come from these places. So for me, Wisconsin Pride, Dungeons and Dragons was invented in Wisconsin. So yeah, exactly. Like it's, Midway was in Chicago for a long time and one of the largest publishers ever until a lot of stuff happened. And they went out of business in 2009. And so find the things around you and talk about that because too few people realize these things come from these places, come from our backyards. And so we just have to find those things and really talk about them more often because we have a lot of things that all come from these places. As much as now they've been bought by companies on the West Coast, that doesn't mean that they change where they came from. And there's just a lot of opportunity to bring things back. And it's just we have to be better, especially in the Midwest. Like how humble people are is a problem. As much as I love how humble people are, they don't talk about themselves at all. They don't talk about the successes, and we need to talk about our successes more often.
Hi, James. So my question is, when it comes to finding opportunities within the industry, what racial or like gender biases would come, like would likely we will experience as new indie developers?
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
When it comes to like opportunities with for like inside the industry, what like racial biases or like things might indie developers experience?
So how might it impact? Is that
Yeah, how might we? Is there any like possible experience we have with that or?
Yep. What have you seen has been the most common like barriers to entry for
Yeah.
people that are looking to, that might be coming from a marginalized background?
Yeah, I mean, people, it's why there's a lot of combating, even the hiring processes, like a lot of it's set up to ultimately fail folks that come from different backgrounds. Even like, the expectation that you're going to have a student tie, like that comes from a different kind of understanding and cultural norm that might not exist in elsewhere, and people make judgments off of it. It's part of the reason I'm against cover letters and against some of the things because they all create negative like barriers in ways, and it's the unconscious bias that people have with some of these things. And so, we're not, this stuff isn't eliminated. There's a lot of conversations, and I think a key piece is creating discussion around these things, and talking about what is the better way forward? Like, what is the solution to some of these things? Because they're complex. They're incredibly complex. There is no easy answer for how we solve these issues. But if we talk about it more often, civilly, and talk about the opportunities to create more, it's going to help us because it's proven diverse companies earn at, I think, a 33% better rate. So if you want to make more money, have a diverse company. And so if we can turn the conversation towards why it's beneficial, we can kind of make change, and especially the games industry, because we want to entertain the world. We're the largest entertainment industry in the world. If we want to entertain the world, we have to represent the world, which means we need to look like the world. And right now, we look like California. And we need to look like other places.
Hey, I just wanted to address that question that you got. The answer that I would give you is if you're someone from a marginalized group looking for work in the industry, the best thing to do is do your research and find out which companies are actively hiring people from diverse groups, and they will say so, and you can find out what their practices are within the company. Talk to people how to represent groups within those companies. Do your research first, and that's how you'll bother applying for companies that aren't actively recruiting people who might represent groups. It's just a good policy.
Yeah, and not only that, but also know who's pretending and who's real. And you can go to websites like Glassdoor and others and see how their employees actually think about some of their practices, which makes a big difference.
Perfect. We have a question online from CJ Kirshner from Polyhedron Productions. Investors typically expect exponential returns. What advice can you offer game development startups to convince VCs they're a worthwhile bet, especially given the creative and financial uncertainty that comes with creating a new title?
VC is my favorite topic ever. Know who you're taking your money from. Everyone has a different priority. A publisher has a certain thing that they want to see happen. A VC has a certain thing that they want to see happen. Angel investor, whoever it is you're taking money from, make sure you understand what their priority is. So for venture capital, their priority is that you sell your company in the next 5 to 10 years for 10 to 100 times return on their investment. So if you're creating a studio because you want to work with your friends, or you want to do something super creative, you want to have control over your studio, you want to be there for a long time, venture is a terrible route for you because they are going to want you to sell your company when you succeed. So you create something that succeeds, and then they want you to get rid of it or work under somebody else. Which, if that's what you want to do, it's a great route. So just understand like the expectations that come with that and the money, because as much as like it might be appealing because they offer ridiculous amounts of money, it's because they see you as a 10 to 100 times return on their investment, and they want you to exit as soon as possible so that they can get a return and turn that into another 100 bets where they do those things. So just understand that, and too often we don't educate around what they're trying to do, why they exist, and why you're taking money from them. But there are venture firms that do different things. There's economic development venture firms that have different priorities of things. So understand what the firm is, what they're trying to do, and that will help you not get in a situation where you suddenly succeed and you now don't have control over your company.
We're going to do one last question, but Ben is going to be staying after to be able to answer some questions after we're finishing with opening ceremonies. So if you do have some burning questions, you'll be able to chat with him and our next special guest speaker after the event.
Kind of following up on that topic, I was kind of wondering, with so much volatility in the industry, and we're juniors right now, how much would you either encourage or discourage forming a new studio instead of trying to go find a job in the industry, or like throw your resume to 500 companies and hope somebody calls you back?
I mean, things are going to get better. It's a tough. I could do a whole talk on just the things that go into why we're in the situation we're in and what could be happening in the future. So the reality is, you don't know what the route is that your career is going to take. So I'm always a fan of like, get as many options out there, and you have to jump at one at some point. For me, when I've jumped through my career at many different things. Going from radio to like operations to games, and then suddenly I'm on the technical end. I'm not an engineer. And then suddenly I'm on the marketing end, and then suddenly I'm in esports, and then I'm in film, and then I'm back in games, but creating a subscription service for Netflix, and then I'm creating my own company. And it's like, it just jumped at opportunities. Now I had other things I could have jumped to. And you always have the, well, what if? But one of them was, creating my own thing. And eventually I did end up doing that. But actually all that experience working for others and learning from others, because when I first came out, I was like, oh yeah, I know everything. Like I can do this. And the longer I was in the system, the more I realized I didn't know anything. And then I got to a point where I, did that enough where I learned a lot. And then I was like, okay, maybe I'll take this knowing I don't know a lot, but I'm going to learn a lot by doing it. And so just prepare for any possible path, because the market could suddenly shift. And then there's a lot of jobs, and then there's an opportunity to go do that. And maybe you have been creating something, but the best option is actually to go jump into something else. And so be willing to jump towards something else, a new opportunity, something you can learn, and take your skills that you have and that are transferable to that role, and then always have something that you're going to grow in that role. Don't just do a lateral, like it's the same thing for somebody else. Like, have an opportunity that they're going to grow you in a certain way, because then those skills become even better for you to continue to build onto the next thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ben. Let's give him a big warm round of applause. Welcome.